Hello, and a warm welcome to our special Love Athletics show, Athletics History Live. The World Cross Country Championships are taking place soon in Bathurst, Australia on 18 February, several weeks later than the traditional date at the end of March. So our program will be entirely dedicated to cross country. And we're delighted to have with us British statistician and athletics lover, Mark Butler, to discuss this fascinating specialty. Hello, Mark. Lovely to see you, and a big thank you for joining us.
Hello, Anna. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you. So, Mark, let's start first by taking a look at the origins of cross country. How and where did this was this specialty born?
Well, I think we have to go way back, even to the reign of the first Queen Elizabeth in the 16th century, when there were the first records of what we now know as paper chases. That is an event where somebody would run ahead like a hare and drop pieces of paper, and then a group of runners would follow them, follow the trail, and the objective being to catch the hare before the finish line.
Wow.
But this was very much a means to an end. We're talking about something that was going on mainly in British public schools to prepare young gentlemen for fox hunting, because that's the sort of thing you would do if you were hunting foxes on horseback. And also at that time, rowers were known to do cross-country running as preparation for the rowing season. So they were doing cross-country running when they were unable to do the rowing. And I don't know if you know the very famous British film, The Railway Children. There's a scene in that with a paper chase where the lead runner goes through a railway tunnel dropping bits of paper, and the runners follow through that. So I don't think today's cross-country courses would have that sort of feature on a course, but that's what happened when that film was set. And so if you move on to the mid 1800s or 1830s, there's a place called Crick, which is a town about 10 miles or so away from Rugby, where there was a very famous public school where the sport of rugby was invented, rugby football. That was possibly the first cross-country race from Crick to Rugby, about 10 miles, and it's still going after all these years.
Wow.
So these were the first signs of cross-country running that we can trace.
Oh, thank you, Mark. That was really interesting. Let's look now at where and when the first national and international cross-country championships took place.
Well, yes, the first British championships in 1876 were declared null and void because everybody went off course. I think people were used to being following trails of paper, and all 32 runners went off course, and it was declared null and void. So the first champion wasn't crowned until 1877. And it wasn't long after that.
The women's race started in 1927, which is a lot earlier than most other championships.
That's true. I don't think there were obviously women's races before then, and that's obviously just the year before women's events were at the Olympic Games.
Mm-hmm.
As you can see, USA, France, and the first international match, France v England in France. Again, that was a little bit of a disaster because none of all the French runners all the English runners finished ahead of the French. So it wasn't really a very competitive event. However, things still progressed, and in 1903, in Scotland, the first international cross-country championships, although we wouldn't regard it as international by today's standards because it involved Scotland, Wales, and England, and obviously Ireland, that's a different country, but it wasn't exactly an international span of competitors. And then shortly after that, we had the it's not shown there, but from 1912, the Olympic Games cross country, I think we'll go on to that. But gradually, more and more countries had national championships, and the international cross country championships became better attended, right up to the 70s, when it was decided that the governing body of the sport, the International Amateur Athletic Federation, would take control. I think there was a concern that other championships were, or other international championships were arising, which involved countries which hadn't so far taken part in the international cross-country championships. So I think it was 1971 that it was agreed that there would be a World Championships, and I think in 1972, around about the time of the Munich Olympics, was the meeting where they finally decided that it would be, I think, the second half of March 1973, which we can see there was the first World Cross-Country Championships.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And if we look at continents, South America was the first continent to have regularly staged championships starting from 1986. Asia was next from 91. For some reason, they were not held in 2003, not sure why. Europe only started with the continental championships in 1994. We'll talk more about that later. NACAC, North America, Central America, and Caribbean from 2006, Oceania from 2009, and Africa was the last continent. They had a one-on-off version edition in 1985, and then it didn't start until 2011. Basically, at the time that the World Cross Country Championships became biennial, while they'd been held every year. And then the African Confederation restarted a competition for its continental athletes.
That's right. And World Athletics, as they are now, that was one of the reasons why they decided to stage the World Cross Country Championships every other year, to encourage continental championships such as the ones we've seen there.
Mm-hmm. Now, Mark, you mentioned Olympic Games earlier. So, as you said, it's interesting to note that cross-country races were held in 3 editions of the Olympic Games: in Stockholm 1912, Antwerp 1920, and Paris 1924. But then they were discontinued. Can you tell us more about this?
Well, they were very successful, the 3 races over those 3 Olympic Games, and they attracted the best runners of the time, the Flying Finns as they were known. Hans Kommelainen and Paavo Nurmi were the winners. But the 1924 race in Paris was a little bit of a disaster, even though it was won with an incredible performance by Paavo Nurmi. That was the year he won 5 gold medals at the Olympic Games. But it was the height of summer, and the temperature. Well, I've seen 3 figures: 40 degrees, 45 degrees, and 60 degrees. I think the 60 degrees is referring to the air temperature next to the industrial chimney, which was quite adjacent to the course. But there were lots of non-finishers, people collapsing. A member of the Finnish team took 2 minutes to run the last 100 meters. And it sort of became clear that cross-country was not a summer sport. You know, it's not like on the track where you can easily feed people or look after people that are in distress. If it's a cross-country race, that's a lot more complicated. So that was the last cross-country race at the Olympic Games, until actually the Youth Olympic Games of recent years, where they have had a cross-country element to the distance races. So that they have like a combined 3,000 meters cross-country, 1,500 meters cross-country. All the youth athletes that have run a distance race then run a cross-country race, and then the overall champion in each event is decided on the aggregate of placing. So it's a little bit complicated, but at least cross-country is there in a Summer Olympic Games for the first time.
Mm-mm. Thank you. So as we saw, international cross-country championships started over 120 years ago and gradually became more widespread.
That's right. And but what widespread is an important word here, because when the first World Championships were staged in 1973, there were 85% European competitors and very few from the rest of the world. Obviously, that's, there's 85% Europeans, so it's not much for the rest of the world to be included. But that's because it was more of a traditional sport in Great Britain and Northern Europe, France and Spain and Ireland. These countries dominated the sport in a way which is hard to imagine nowadays, but that was the case then. But gradually, there's been more international representation, as should be at the World Championships.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So let's take a look at how the winners and medalists evolved over the years. So senior men individual, the first in 1973 in the first edition, gold and silver were for Europe with Pekka Päivärinta of Finland and Mariano Haro, and bronze for Oceania's Rod Dixon. Then in 74 and in 76 to 79, all medalists were from Europe. 1975 saw the first medal for NACAC, a bronze for Bill Rogers of the US. And in 1980, the first gold medal for NACAC with Craig Virgin, again of the US. First medal for Africa came the following year with a silver for Mohamed Kadir of Ethiopia, who then went on to win gold the following year. And that time, there was no medal at all for Europe because silver went to the USA's Alberto Salazar and bronze to Rod Dixon of New Zealand. It was 1983 when Kenya earned the first medal, a bronze for Some Muge, and in 1986, first gold for Kenya with John Ngugi, the first of 5. 86 and 88, so 86, all medalists from Africa for the first time. This happened again in 1988. 1989 was the fourth consecutive gold for John Ngugi, who then went on to win his last one in 1992. First gold for Morocco with Khalid Ska in 1990, and then 9 straight years in which all medal lists came from Africa. 1999 saw the 5th consecutive gold for Paul Tergat, who also won bronze the following year. Another 3 years of consecutive all medalists for Africa. 2005, first medal for Asia with a bronze for Abdullah Ahmed Hassan of Qatar. 2006, the 5th consecutive gold for Kenenisa, who then went on to win his 6th and last in 2008. And then, so as we saw from 2006 to 2019, again, all medalists came from Africa, but the country started to diversify with 2007 gold going to Zersenay Tadesse of Eritrea, and in 2019, in the last edition before Bathurst, gold going to Uganda's Joshua Cheptegei, followed by compatriot Jacob Kiplimo. So in the team level, African dominance is even more impressive. The first 2 golds went to Europe, to Belgium. 1975 gold went to New Zealand. From 1976 to 1980, it was 5 golds for European countries. And after that, it's been always, from 1981 to 2019, it's been always either Ethiopia, especially in the early years, with a total of 10 victories. Kenya, with a total of 24 team golds, and the last one going to Uganda. So really, we see how the specialty changes over the years.
Yes, and if you look at that statistic in front of you there, Kenya 1986 to 2003,
Yeah.
that's one of the great winning streaks in all sport, let alone athletics, 18 years, I think,
Yes.
of successive team victories. I mean, really dominating more than any country, I think, has done in any sport. I think in 88, we had 8 of the first 9 were Kenyan across the line in the senior race. Wow. That's when there were 9 to run and 6 to score. So you can't really underplay how dominant they were. And in those years, it was very much Kenya and Ethiopia. Going back to the very first years, I would say that even though there wasn't much African representation, there weren't really that many African runners competing across the board. I mean, if you look at the first World Championships, there were just 2 African medals, one in the marathon and one in the men's 1500 meters with Said Owita. So it wasn't really noticed that there wasn't an African presence. And the first World Cross Country Championships you mentioned, Pavarinta and Haro, just a 10th between them. It's a very exciting race. And in third place, Rod Dixon, New Zealand, as he was, I think, in 1982 as well. And he was part of that winning team in 75, I think. So he was an Olympic medalist at the 1500 meters. So it was attracting really good runners, well-known runners, and it was a big deal. But things started to change, as the statistics have just shown, with 1980 being the last year that England won the championships, having won it many times. 81, Mohammed Kadir very nearly winning that race, but then winning in 82, and more or less since then it's been Kenya, Ethiopia, and now happily other African countries are seeing success.
Exactly. Uganda has been doing well in the last edition, so it's good to see diversity. On the other hand, Morocco, who used to be quite good in the earlier years, they've kind of dropped off the radar. So let's look at the women's senior individual stats. So as for the men, at the beginning, all medalists for Europe in the first 2 years, with a double gold for Italy's Paola Pignicacchi, followed by the first gold for NACAC the next year with Julie Brown of the US. For 3 straight years, all medalists from Europe, again in 1980. 1981 saw the 4th consecutive gold for Grete Waitz of Norway, who then added another gold in 1983. Again, some periods in which all medalists were from Europe, 1982, 87, and 88. First medal for Africa came in 1991 with Derartu Tulu taking silver. Then 3 consecutive third consecutive gold for Lynn Jennings of the US. First gold for Africa with Kenya's Helen Chepngeno. 1996 and 2000, all female medalists were from Africa. In 2004, we have the first and last gold for Oceania with Australia's Benita Johnson. And here again, all medalists from Africa in 2005, last gold for Europe in 2007 with Lorna Kiplagat, and after that, 3 years of all medalists from Africa. Last medal for NACAC was in 2011 with a bronze medal for the USA's Shalane Flanagan, and in the last 4 editions, all medalists have been from Africa. At the team level, sorry, Mark.
No, yes, I was just going to say that it's the same sort of pattern as we saw in the men's, but perhaps less pronounced because it took a little longer for Ethiopia and Kenya to repeat the success of their men.
Exactly. It's like on the track. Men started to be very successful in the Olympic Games in the 60s. It took the women the 90s before they started to medal and earn gold. So the women were arriving later on the athletics scene. So
And
senior
there's
team,
another little trend.
yes,
Sorry, yeah, excuse me for interrupting. There's another little trend there we can see from in 2007, which I think is quite notable. Lorna Kiplagat winning for the Netherlands. Now, Lorna Kiplagat was or is an athlete who transferred allegiance from Kenya to the Netherlands. Her Dutch husband. She's been a great servant for athletics with her training camp in Kenya.
yes,
So, as with Mohamed Mourhid, I think as in the
exactly.
men's race, also transferred from Morocco to Belgium. We do see in the early 2000s more and more of these athletes that have transferred from African countries winning medals for other continents.
Yes, yep, that's right. Mm-mm. So team results for the women. Again, early golds and all medalists tended to be from Europe. First gold for NACAC in 75, and first medal for Oceania with a silver for New Zealand. Then gold for Europe in 3 editions. Then NACAC, again, 3 consecutive golds for Europe with the Soviet Union. Golds for NACAC with the US, England, NACAC, last gold for Soviet Union, and then in the from the early 90s, in 1991 to 93, gold for Africa. So last gold for Europe was in 1994, team gold for Portugal, which was brilliant. And then between 95 and 2019, all gold medals have gone to Africa. And here it's interesting because while in the men's it was really Kenyan domination, here we have a total of 9 team titles for Kenya and 12 team titles for Ethiopia.
Yes, it's been a bit more of a battle between the two. I think there's a bit more depth for the Ethiopian women than there is for the Ethiopian men, and yes, it's interesting that isn't quite the same with the men and the women, because, as I say, Kenya were crushingly dominant. Although Kenyan women have had their moments in 2017 when they won that last team gold. They had the first 6 across the line, and this is when it was 6 to run, 4 to score. So their entire team beat the rest of the world on that occasion.
Yes. Mm-mm. So from 98 to 2006, in addition to the traditional long races, a short race, approximately 4 kilometers long, was introduced. Now, Mark, can you tell us why the short race was added to the program and why it was then cancelled?
Well, first of all, it was felt that, I mean, those statistics we've just seen, despite the African or Kenyan and Ethiopian monopoly in recent years, it's a true world championships, because it's not as if Europe weren't represented and not trying. We're talking a huge number of countries entering the championships, and it was felt it was too big an event to just spend one day on. At the same time, the IF president at the time, Primo Nebbiolo, wanted to attract more middle distance runners. I mean, the miles have always been a blue ribbon event. He wanted to see middle distance runners compete and wanted to give them an event to compete in. So it was agreed from 1998 to have a short race and a long race, the long race being the same length as the existing race, the short race being like 4 kilometers, which would attract the top milers and even 800 meter runners of the day. So from 1998 to 2006, the program had increased from just senior race and junior race to a short senior race, a long senior race, and a junior race for everybody. But sadly, it didn't attract middle distance runners. I think part of the reason for that is because there were just more and more opportunities. Indoor athletics was, or is, very popular. Lots of indoor championships and indoor opportunities in America and in Europe. And I think it also didn't help that athletes of the time like Nordin Morselli and Hikam El Garouj were sometimes entered for these events, but then when the declarations came out, they weren't on the start list. I think on one occasion, El Garouj was at an event and he could be seen warming up or training with the athletes, but then decided not to compete. And I mean, it certainly would have been Nebbiolo's wish, for example, that El Garouj would have competed in the short race at Marrakesh in 1998 in front of his home crowd. But, I think his priority was still on the track then. He was about to break the world record the following year, the record which still stands, and you can only do so much. And I think it was only in the very last year that a middle distance runner won a middle distance specialist won a medal. So it was felt that experiment didn't really work. And then from 2007, we had just the long race and one day for the championships.
Yeah.
And interestingly, now I think it's gone the other way, because the relays are attracting middle distance runners, because obviously there's a bit of a difference between running an individual race of 4 kilometers in terms of pressure and preparation, and one leg of 1 mile or so, or 1,500 meters as part of a relay team. You can see that why that would be more attractive for a middle distance specialist. You're only running a middle distance race. You're not running a 4-kilometer race. But then again, there've always been very good middle distance runners that have thrived on much longer cross-country races, starting with Rod Dixon, as we mentioned, in 1973. And I know the current World Athletics president has always advocated cross-country running as a good basis for middle distance athletes.
Thank you, Mark. Now, only 3 athletes have won both a long and short cross. Let's take a look.
Yes, this is
Kenenisa
in the same.
Bekele is amazing.
Yes.
Exactly. He won. He had 5 straight double victories, triumphing in both long and short. Sonia O'Sullivan, on the first year in which the short cross was introduced, she produced a wonderful double against very talented athletes, because she was up against Paula Radcliffe in the long cross, Zara Waziz in the short cross, so Getewami as well. So very, very impressive victory by Sonia O'Sullivan in both the long and the short races.
Yes, I was going to say there are other athletes that have won both the long and the short, but not in the same years. These 3 all run in the same years. So that's why it's very useful to have this list. Yes, and so you can see for almost all of the era of the long and short race, Kenenisa Bekele won both races. Although how many times did he say, "Oh, I'm only going to do one race," or "I'm not going to do both races," and always ended up running them both and winning them really well. And of course, he was a world-class 1,500 meter runner anyway. We just didn't see it very often because he was always there to run 5,000s and 10,000s at championships, as was Sonia O'Sullivan, a terrific 1,500 meter runner. And I'm sure Tirunesh Dibaba would have run a very fast 1,500 if she wanted to. I don't think she'd competed that much at that distance, although she just made a comeback, so perhaps we will see that.
Thank you. So let's take a look now quickly at the winners and medalists of the short race. And here it's really impressive because in all editions, Africa among the men senior short race, Africa has won all individual medals in every single edition. As far as team medals are concerned, they again won them all except 3. In 2002, bronze for Spain. In 2004, silver for Qatar. And in 2005, bronze for Qatar. So huge African dominance in the short race. Among the women, Africa won all individual medals except as we saw, gold for Sonia O'Sullivan in 2008, silver in 99 for Yamna Belkacem of France, and bronze for Finland's Anne-Marie Sandel, and in 2001, silver for Paula Radcliffe. Africa won all team gold and silver medalists in all editions, except 99 gold for France, led by Yamna Belkacem. In 2000, gold for Portugal. And interesting, Africa doesn't have the same depth among the women as in the men in the terms of countries. So they only managed team bronze once with Morocco in 1999. Otherwise, medals went twice to the US, but also to France, Romania, Ireland, Russia, Canada, and Australia. So Kenya and Ethiopia very strong, but not really a very strong, a third African contender.
I think in some of those years, I think when Portugal won, for example, they were targeting a particular race, and that's certainly been the case. I think in other years where certainly where there was a short and long race, all the eggs were put into one basket rather than trying to do well in both races, get all your distance runners in the short race. So I think that was one little bit of variety which Nebbiolo would have approved of.
Now let's take a quick look at winners and medalists of the under-20 races. So for men, the category was introduced from the beginning, 1973, and the US enjoyed early success with 4 consecutive golds, both individual and team, from 1974 to 1977. The first medal for Africa was a gold medal by Tunisia's Mohamed Shouri in 1981, followed by the first gold for Ethiopia with Zurbayev Gela. Last gold for Europe in 1984 with Pere Casacubierta of Spain. And also last medal for NACAC the same year with bronze for Canada's John Castellano. First gold for Kenya came in 1985 with Kipkemboi Kimeli. From 85 to 11, all medalists were from Africa. And again, when it went biannual from 2013 to 2019, again, all medalists were from Africa. So, but as we saw, Uganda emerging with their first medal in 2003, a silver for Boniface Kiprop, and then in 2019, gold for Jacob Kiplimo in the home edition in Kampala. Teams for the junior under-20 men. In the first edition, all medalists were from Europe. Then, as we saw, 4 consecutive team golds for NACAC. First gold for Africa in 1982 with Ethiopia, the first of 6 straight team titles. 1988, first gold for Kenya, the first of 10 straight titles. 92, first medal for Asia with a bronze for Japan. And in total, from 82 to 2019, all golds went to Africa, 24 for Kenya in total, and 11 for Ethiopia.
Yes, I think that the same trend, as we've already discussed. I think another thing that is evident from this is that certainly in Africa, there's been much more organisation and organised training camps and coaching and management as well. So we've seen a reflection of that in the results at the championships. And at the same time, there has been, certainly since '94, a bit of decline in the European presence, not because there haven't been good runners, but because we've had the European cross-country championships in December, and that's been the cross-country focus for a lot of the top European runners, rather than the World Championships, which may take place a long way away from Europe, as is the case this year, and as is the case this year, the same time slot as the European Indoor Championships, so they prioritise that rather than the cross-country. You can't do everything all the time, so the line gets drawn somewhere.
Body needs a rest. Now, the women's under 20 race was introduced in 1989. Again, early success for Europe, with gold and silver for Sweden and Russia. And this is the last time there was a double. First gold and silver for Asia in 1990. 91, first gold medal for Nakak, with a bronze for USA's Melody Fairchild. Last gold for Europe came in 1995 with Finland's Anne-Marie Sandell. 99, last medal for Asia with a bronze by Yoshiko Fujigawa of Japan. Now, the women's medals are really interesting, I think, because Africa started right away with gold in 1989, but then one thing I always found very interesting was the performances by the Japan under 20 athletes, who have won a total of 19 medals, 3 silver and 16 bronze out of 27 editions. That's a pretty impressive statistic. From 2003, all medal, again, 2003, 2007, 2010, all medalists for Africa. Last medal for Europe was a bronze for the under 20 women by Great Britain in 2013. And again, in 2017, all medals from Africa. So I've always been fascinated by the really good performances by the under 20 Japanese ladies. We saw in the men's level, they had twice 2 bronze medals, I think. But the women have been very, very consistent and almost always showing up on the podium.
Yes, I think it's a reflection of the great depth there is of distance running in Japan. And also Japanese marathon runners are very famous figures in their country. So it is something that a lot of youngsters aspire to. And as we know, they have the great system of corporate athletics there, where people are running for various companies. Not too many individual stars, but they're very, very good in the team aspect, packing well, as is known in cross-country parlance, which means that they form a group and stay in a group high places and get the good team score. So they've got the numbers to do that. One other thing I'd like to point out from the list you just read out, Anne-Marie Sandell's victory in 1995, that was quite significant, because I remember that year, 1995 in Durham, and we saw this young Finnish lady warming up with Kenyan runners, and I thought, well, what's happening here? And of course, I think she was one of the first European runners who started preparing for events like this in Kenya. So she knew a lot of the Kenyan team that year, because she'd been training with them and in their country for several weeks, and it paid off at the championships. And now it's commonplace for European athletes to train at altitude for long periods of time in places like Ethiopia and Kenya. That was the first time we saw that sort of thing. I think it certainly manifested itself in the cross-country championships.
Great. Now, Mark, you always have lots of cool, interesting statistics about the world cross. Tell us a couple of the interesting tidbits from this event.
Well, the medal lists we showed earlier I think had Kenenisa Bekele on 11, but that was the individual senior titles that he'd won. But if you look at the total number of medals he won, it was 27, which I think is the most medals ever won by anybody, including, I think, 16 golds. And the women's total, I think the record total is 21 by another Ethiopian, Worknesh Kidani. And I'm not sure whether some of these statistics will never be beaten, because in those years we had not only the cross-country championships every year, but we had a senior race, we had a short race and a long race with a team element in both. So at the peak, there were 4 gold medals available every year. So nowadays, I don't think it's going to, I'm not sure if those totals will ever be beaten. Unless perhaps Bekele makes a comeback and decides to run across country one more time, which isn't beyond the realms of possibility, I would think. But now, I also think, I was going to quickly point out that the leading women nowadays are running the same sort of half marathon time as the leading men were when Africa first started to break through in the early 80s. So that shows the progress of sport. I think Letesenet Gide has a very similar half marathon personal best, the world record of 62:52, as Miriç Yifter did in 1981 when he was part of the winning Ethiopian team. So that's a cool statistic for me. I know that technology's changed and courses are faster and this sort of thing, but you couldn't have imagined this in 1981, that a woman will be running 62 minutes for a half marathon.
No, absolutely. I mean, in the last couple of years, women's performances and marathon and half marathon have just exploded. It's really great, and there's a depth as well. It's not just the front runner like Letsenbet, but there's a really good depth in there, which is just absolutely brilliant.
5 countries have done every World Cross Country Championships. I'm not going to remember these now. Britain, France, Spain, USA, and France, Spain, USA. Anyway, I'll come back to that. These are other records which might not be broken, because in those years the World Cross Country Championships was every year. And Portugal also hold the record for the most competitors at the World Cross Country Championships, which is 806 in 2000 in Vila Moura. But then again, as I mentioned before, there were 6 races.
No, it's fantastic. And Portugal, as we saw, most appearances for both men and women, really very impressive. It's also true that, Kenya and even Ethiopia have such a depth of athletes that they would have difficulty selecting them every year, and it's less easy to be selected on the team consistently. But Domingos Castro with 18 appearances and Conceição Ferreira with 17 are really very impressive.
And now, Italy was the other country that I omitted from that list of.
Oh my goodness, Mark, you forgot about my country.
Yes.
So most victories at the World Cross. So as you said, I only counted the individual titles. So I've got 11 for Kenenisa with the long and short double between 202 and 206, plus a last long course win in 2008. And of course, in 2001, he had won gold in the under 20 category and silver in the short cross. Tergat, 5 consecutive titles, individual titles. John Gugi, 5 titles, but not consecutive, 86 to 89, plus 1992. Carlos Lopez with 3 victories in 76, 84 and 85, and also a silver in 77 and 83. So these are the most impressive, most titled men in individual races, not counting all the team golds. Senior women dominated by Grete Waitz with 5 victories, 78 to 81, and a last one in 83. Tirunesh Dibaba, as we saw, she had a long and short cross double in 2005 and 2 more titles in the long cross in 206 and 208. Then 3 athletes with 3 individual medals, golds. Lynn Jennings, 90 to 92. Derartu Tulu spread out 95, 97, and 2000, plus silver in 91. And Edith Masai, she won the short cross 3 times between 202 and 204, and she also had a bronze in 2001. So the most individual medals have been won by these athletes. Then, as you said, if you add team titles, the picture changes, but I prefer to focus on individual medals.
Yes, well, these have always been the big ones, so that makes perfect sense. I mean, even when there was a short race at the World Cross Country Championships, I think it was felt that the big deal was the thing to do, the main race certainly for individuals. One figure on there that was on the first page of the men's, Carlos Lopez, and yet another Portuguese record. Will it ever be broken? Because he won at the age of 38 his last title. Yeah. Nowadays, it's a much younger demographic that is succeeding, and we're often seeing athletes progress from junior to senior victories in quite quick succession. Carlos Lopez had a very, very long career, and even after he won the World Cross Country Championships at that relatively advanced age, he became Olympic champion in the marathon. So
exactly,
it does go to show what a good grounding cross country can give you. If you can run a good cross country race and win it, then you're going to be pretty good in other areas as well.
Definitely. So we've been talking about all these wonderful athletes, and Mark, tell us, who are your top 3 male and female cross-country athletes and why?
I think I put John Ngugi there at 5-time winner because he was running at a time when there were 9 per team, so he had more Kenyans and more Ethiopians to beat, as well as being part of the team, and his winning margins were bigger. So I would give him the edge, even though obviously Paul Tergat and Kenan Nisipikili, and I think that's Paul Tergat, would certainly be up there in the Hall of Fame for the greatest ever. And I remember watching Paul Tergat win as Kenan Nisipikili. I remember watching Paul Tergat win in '96 in Stellenbosch, and he just destroyed the field in 1 lap. Not quite as big a winning margin as John Ngugi, but certainly stamped his domination in very effectively just when he wanted to. And this is the scene we've seen so many times at the World Cross Country Championships: groups of Kenyans and Ethiopians in the leading pack. And as the race progresses, we wonder who's going to be the best on the day, which team's going to win. So yes, Ngugi, Tergat, and obviously Kenan Nisipikili, who very nearly won that short race in 2001 as well. He was closing all the time on I think Isaac Songa was the Kenyan who won that year. I just don't think he realised how good he was. But we from that point onwards, where everybody knew, including himself.
And the women?
The women, for the same reason, Grete Waitz, the late Grete Waitz of Norway, she's top of your list with 5 gold medals. Now you have to remember, in her heyday, cross-country distances for women, and indeed athletics distances for women, were very short. And when she first won the World Cross Country Championships, they weren't even running 3,000 meters at the Olympics. So this was a really big deal. This was the longest championship available for a woman runner. And in Paris in 1980, when she won by 44 seconds. Now, this is a race of less than 5,000 meters. So it's rather like winning a 5,000 meter race by almost a lap. In other words, lapping everybody in the race. So I remember watching that race on television, and it was just, she just ran away from the field. And the best available runners in the world were behind her. So it wasn't like it was a soft year. So I will put her down. I also have a great regard for Vivian Chariot. Rather like Carlos Lopez just now, I was saying, she gradually improved throughout the years, and this isn't a statistic I've completely explored. Perhaps I should have done, but she won medals in the 90s and the 2000s, and then won senior gold for the first time in 2011. So that's across 3 decades, the Kenyan. So we saw her growing up. So Greta Weitz and Vivian Chariot, because she progressed so well from the junior ranks in the 1990s, then the senior ranks, and then finally won the senior title in 2011, and then became Olympic champion. And I think also, obviously, Tirunesh Dibaba, because she was so dominant in her heyday, she never looked like losing a race once she started, when she was near her best, which she always was. Just goes to show how seriously Ethiopia take these championships. And also I mentioned for Paula Radcliffe, because she didn't show in those graphics that you mentioned, because there were other European winners before her, but she took on and beat the Ethiopians and everybody else on 2 occasions at the World Cross Country Championships.
That's right. She also has a series of silver medals. So she has 2 golds, but she has a series of silver medals, which just show that she was really, really strong. An athlete who excelled in cross country was Paul Tergat, definitely one of the outstanding cross country athletes, winning 5 straight editions from 95 to 99, as well as bronze in 2000, before focusing on road races, where he also shone. Let's hear from Tergat why he loved cross country and what his favorite memory is from this specialty.
So, Paul, good morning, and thank you so much. First things first, you have been appointed as the World Athletics Cross Country Ambassador for the forthcoming World Cross in Australia. How does that make you feel?
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to say that I'm very excited that I'm part and parcel of these cross country championships as an ambassador. And for me, cross country is one of the biggest events that in my sports career, and also it evolves a lot of sweet memories in terms of all my career as a sportsman until where I've reached.
And having been one of the biggest cross-country runners that the world has ever seen, what can you say is the state of the cross-country? Is it still relevant in this day and age?
First of all, I want to say that the beauty of cross-country is an event which brings in a lot of sportsmen of different disciplines together in one place. You find out that an athlete who is running 800 meters to an athlete who is running marathon in one place. And for me, I want to say that because, and also this is an event that it has a lot of twists and turns, which makes cross country to be what it is. And for sure, I want to say that for me, it has actually, cross country will always be a legacy to me for many years and generations to come.
Brilliant. So what are you looking forward for in Australia?
In Bacchus, Australia, I'm looking forward maybe to go and see and maybe to cheer up and tell the Australians, yes, we are coming, and we are looking forward to have a very successful World Cross Country Championship, which to me, after this, I would really love maybe to see cross country be part of the Olympic Games in the near future.
Fantastic. And lastly, what are your favorite moments as a cross-country runner that you remember from the past that even today when you remember, you feel your heart just glows?
Wow, the only thing that comes to my mind is that when I was my last cross country in 1999 in Belfast. That one still stands out like yesterday in my memory, and I believe that that was the epic of it. It was very cold, very muddy, very hilly, and eventually I was able maybe to win my last 50 straight World Cross Country Championship in 1999.
Oh, that is so special. Thank you so much. Enjoy your time and all the best in Australia.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Our last video is from Franco Fava, who lived the cross-country championships first as an athlete and then as a journalist. So let's hear from Franco what he has to say about this event.
Hello to everybody. It's time of cross-country, and for me, cross-country has been everything in my career. I did start with cross-country as many athletes, and even if I ran a long distance on the track till the marathon, cross-country was the relevant part of my preparation. Since I began running as a junior, the cross-country championships. At that time, it was called Cross de la Nation. My first edition was in 1970 in Vichy, France, and it was an unbelievable experience. Because I always thought myself and my coach that you couldn't run fast in the summer and on the track and on the road in any distance if you don't prepare running and doing cross country during the winter. It's good to break the long preparation during the winter. Then I used to have a short break before starting the track season. So I never saw my preparation without cross country. And why I love, because cross country does not need to break any record. You don't have to look and to think to the clock, and you don't know what to expect. The condition of the race, you can get a muddy race, a muddy surface, as I met when I won my first international cross country as a junior in La Sarthe, San Sebastian, 1971. I won as a junior when David Bedford won the senior race. It was a muddy course, so you can train also your endurance in any kind of course. And naturally, what I remember most is my fourth place at the Cross Country International Championships, at the World Cross Country Championship in Düsseldorf in 1977, when I missed the podium just by a few meters in the last 100 meters. And I was bet for the bronze medal by the German friend Hullemann. As a journalist, I did cover as athletes 10 World Cross Country Championship and almost 30 World Cross Country Championship as a journalist. So among those, I did follow as a journalist with extreme condition was the edition of New York in 1984. The condition was so cold, and all the competitors had to run on the icy course with the snow. And also for us as a journalist, it was nice to watch that special race, but it was also difficult to work about it and to write and to type on the press tent. So cross country is full of surprise, expectation, and give you a lot of strength and a lot of good preparation for everybody.
On a continental level, as we saw, European cross-country championships were first held in '94 and have since been staged every year in December, every year except 20,000 because of COVID. European cross championships were apparently born from a proposal put forward by French sports daily L'Equipe to encourage European athletes not to abandon a specialty increasingly dominated by African athletes. Let's look at the top stars of the European cross-country championships. Among the women, this is Turkey's Yasemin Can, who won 4 straight titles, 2016 to 2019, while among the men, the Ukraine's Serhiy Lebed reigns supreme with a stunning 9 titles. Let's look at the details. So 9 for Serhiy Lebed, 98, 2001 to 2005, 2007 and 2008 and 2010. Paulo Guerra, again, Portugal, strong in the early years, 94, 95, and 99 to 2000. Then 2 athletes with 2 golds. We're talking about senior races. Alemajeu Bezabe of Spain and Jakob Ingebrigtsen of Norway, who won the last 2 editions and who, of course, had 4 titles as an under-20 athletes between 2016 and 2019. Senior women, Yasemin Can, 2016 to 2019, 4 titles. Paula Radcliffe, 2 titles in 98 and 2003. 2 also for Fiona Britton of Ireland and for Caroline Bjerkelly Grøvdal, who with Jakob Ingebrigtsen has won the last 2 editions, and she also had 1 gold as an under-20 athlete in 2009. Now, Mark, what are your favorite memories from cross, world, continental, or national championships?
Well, actually, I just want to mention Jakob Ingebrigtsen there because he is somebody who has proved that the African distance runners can be beaten. He's beaten everybody when he won when he won the world title and the Olympic title at 5,000 meters, and the world title at 5,000 meters, and Olympic title at 1,500 meters. Sadly, this year I don't think he's going to be able to go to Australia because he's prioritising the European Championships. But this is something for the future. But certainly, I think one memory that I will take back with me from the World Championships, my first World Cross Country Championships in 1994 in Budapest, and the atmosphere there, the success of the Kenyans and Ethiopians in particular, and it builds throughout the day because you have the delegations and the teams finishing off each race. And so there's more support for the later races coming on, not just from fans and the media, but also from the teams. And, there was dancing in the stadium towards the end as Ethiopia and Kenya were racking up the victories. And that was just a joyous atmosphere that you don't usually get in sport. So that was a nice moment to be there for that.
Wow. For me, an amazing moment was 2005 when Kenenisa Bekele took his 4th long cross, short cross double, especially because just 2 months earlier, Kenenisa had lost his fiancée, Alem Teshale, on January 4th when she collapsed and died in his arm during training. And I remember just a few months earlier in September 2004, Kenenisa had told her that they were planning to get married in spring. When he came to the pre-event press conference, his eyes were glazed. He really didn't, he seemed to be in a daze, and I honestly didn't think he would win the race. But then he won the first one, and again, he was dominant. And after his first gold, he kind of came alive, and there was still great sorrow in his eyes, but it was wonderful to see how doing something he loved, like running, had helped him to overcome the devastating adversity that had struck him. So that for me, it was probably the most emotional moment in cross country.
I think that was also a highlight for me. I remember that race, and I
Yes.
also remember that was one of the years where Kenya had completely different rivals. Very, very rarely did you see Kenyan athletes doubling up. So that meant you had a completely new set of opponents for Kenenisa Bekele in both races, all throwing all they could at him. And I remember thinking, if he can win this under these circumstances, you know, he can win anything, and he did.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely amazing. Let's take a quick look at recent races, in particular the last two editions of the World Cross Country Tour. So I think it's really interesting that last year it was two athletes from Burundi. The men's circuit, number one, Rodrigue Kwizera, followed by Nibrai Melak of Ethiopia and Aaron Kiftle of Eritrea. And among the women, the standings were topped by Rahel Daniel, followed by Lucy Mawa, and two athletes tied for third place, Beatrice Chebet and Likina Amebwa. Now, another Eritrean, Dolshi Tesfu, was sixth in the standing. So I find that very interesting to see how new countries are emerging. Eritrean men, of course, had been successful for years, but Eritrean women had never really shown up. And Burundi has been doing very, very well on track as well, of course. And this season, again, among the men, we have two athletes born in Burundi, of course, tied in first place. Of course, Thierry Ndikumwenayo has now obtained a Spanish citizenship, so he will probably start running soon for Burundi. Rodrigue Kwizera is still up there with Levi Kibet. In the women's standings, I must say I'm a little bit confused because Lucy Maiwa has won 4 races, I believe 3 of them count. Rahel Daniel has now also won all the races she took part in. She didn't compete at the end of 2022, but this year she was successful in Campaccio on the 6th of January, 2 days later in El Goibar, and in Hanut on the 22nd of January. But for some reason I don't understand, Hanut doesn't appear in her results on the World Athletics website, so it doesn't appear in the standings. Now, this is very confusing for me. I have no idea why it's happening because Hanut is a gold race in the cross-country tour. So I don't know, maybe I'll figure it out in the next couple of days. So we've still got 2 races, 3 in the World Cross Tour, 2 before Bathurst on the 4th of February and on the 5th of February. And then the final one is going to be on the 26th in Albufeira, Portugal, after that. So we've had, as I said, Lucy Mawia and Rahel Daniel doing very, very well. But I'm thrilled to see new countries emerging. Burundi among the men, this is Lucy, and Rahel Daniel for Eritrea. So congratulations to that. A quick check on the entries for Bathurst so far, because they're being declared these days. So among the stars of our sport who have won medals on track and cross country and are entered for Bathurst, the standout name is Letsenbet Gidey, who boasts world records on the track and roads, and of course a bronze medal in her first senior race in Aarhus 219, and she had already had 2 goals in the under 20. Now, she won the European selections on the 1st of January, 19 seconds ahead of defending champion Gete Alemayehu, and 6 more seconds ahead of the steeplechase medalist at the World Championships this year. And it'll be interesting to see how she fares on a tough course like Mount Panorama in Bathurst. On the men's side, the Ethiopian team is led by trials winner Beriu Aregawi, the 10,000 meter fourth placer, and he also finished 9 seconds ahead of his competitors. Kenyan trials for Bathurst provided major surprises, with 20-year-old Sebastian Kimaru Sawa and 19-year-old Grace Leubach showing great assurance to take unexpected senior wins ahead of more titled athletes. So the Kenyan team will be a mix of youth and experience. And among the top Kenyan athletes, the most experienced ones, we have former champions Irene Cheptai, who won in 2017, and Jeffrey Kamworor, who took senior titles in 2015 and 2017, and he already had a junior title in 2011. He's coming back from a stress fracture and had only been training for 3 months, so we'll see what kind of shape he is in Australia. Among, as we saw, the winners of the cross tour standings, Rodrigue Quizera and Rahel Daniel will be competing. Rahel Daniel has already declared her intention to go for the gold. Other stars include former former top stars in the Kenyan team, former world half marathon world record holder Kibiwot Kandie. Now, Uganda has a very strong team with Joshua Cheptegei and Jacob Kiplimo. And top names among the women include Commonwealth 2018 Commonwealth Games 10,000 meter champion Stella Chesang and 19-year-old Priska Chesang, whom we see here in the San Silvestre Vallecana, where she was really dominant. Very impressive win, beating athletes like Neon Saba and Beatrice Chebet. So very, very impressive young athlete from Uganda. The US trials for Bathurst saw 2 first-time champions for both men and women senior races. Emmanuel Bor was victorious among the men in a tight finish with Andrew Colley and Anthony Rotich, while in the women's race, Edna Kurgat took a dominant win over Makena Morley and Emily Durgin. So, Mark, what are you most looking forward to at the World Cross in Bathurst?
Well, I've just noticed, by the way, it's taking place here, in round about there in Australia, behind me. I'm actually looking forward to, I mean, most of the names you just mentioned, all of the names you just mentioned, I'm looking forward to that. What's going to be interesting is we've never had to wait 4 years for a World Cross Country because of the pandemic. It was 4 years ago. So the game, I think, has changed a bit. So it's going to be interesting to see how things fall into place. I think I hope Australia will have a very good team for the mixed relay because they have great middle distance runners. And I know Oliver Hoare, the Commonwealth Games 1500 meter champion, is hoping to run. So they're going to feel a strong team, and it would be great for them to get a medal. It's always good to see a home team get a medal, and they've only ever won women's medals before. So that's going to be something to look forward to. Rahel Daniel, yes, he's another one that's benefiting from the fact that now the men's and women's distances are the same. So it's a longer course for women, over 10,000 meters. And I think that will suit her very much. Lesenet Gide, well, that picture said it all, didn't it? The one you showed. Yeah. She was smiling, beating all her compatriots out of sight in their trial race. She wants to win this race. It's one of the few things she hasn't won. She's going to be very, very tough to beat. And in the men's, one statistic which would be really cool is that the winner of the junior race in the Kenyan trials was Ismail Kirui, and somebody else called Ismail Kirui was also junior champion in 1992. I don't think they're related, though I have put a feeler out to ask. So could this be the first world title that is won by 2 different athletes with the same name? It's interesting. Ismail Kirui, that name. But I think in general, we need to look carefully at not just the winners, but some of the lower placing Kenyans and Ethiopians and other countries. They're going to be the stars of the future, and this is the first time we'll see them. And I remember in Ostend 2001, that was the first time we saw Bikili and Tirunesh Dibaba. Well, we knew Bikili was good then, but we didn't really know how good Tirunesh Dibaba, who was fifth then, was going to be. So it's nice to know that the first time we saw them was at the World Cross Country Championships, and I'm sure champions from future championships we will see for the first time in Bathurst.
Definitely. Now, on my part, probably the most interesting thing will be to see how teenagers Priska Chesang and Grace Lobach, how they fare in the women's senior race. That's going to be interesting.
Yes, there is a great mixture of youth, which you just mentioned, and experience. We have Emily Chebet and Irene Cheptai, Kamal War and Candy. These are the senior races, are really well-known names in athletics. They will know exactly what they're doing. Doesn't matter if there hasn't been a World Cross Country Championships for 4 years. They know how to win big races like this. And when you've run the sort of times they have and won the sort of races they have, they are going to be tough to beat.
Definitely. So thank you, Mark. We're now at the end of our show, and it was really great having a chat with you about cross.
Thank you very much. It's been fun. It's whetted my appetite. I wish this was tomorrow. I want to see what's happening, what's going to happen.
We have to wait a couple more weeks, but
actually, I need those weeks to prepare. So yes, that's good.
Exactly, and we'll have more team declared, so we'll have a clearer picture.
Yes.
So thank you, Mark. Thank you all for watching. And in the coming weeks, we'll have more great stories from the history of athletics and how they relate to what's currently happening in our sport. And of course, we continue our regular Love Athletics show and recorded now every 2 weeks until early spring. So stay tuned. Thank you, and see you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.